Hey, Supernatural Warriors. Welcome back to another Supernatural Sunday. And I just want to share a few more things from my journey just to remind you of things while you're in your healing journey about God's love for you and His care and that He is on your side. There was a verse that meant a lot to me during the dark days that I held on to that said from Psalms, David said, I would have despaired unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And God can bring you back to the land of the living fully and completely. And so I just want to encourage you in that. I was really encouraged. I was watching The Chosen, which is a Bible show. And one of the disciples said to another one, your time hasn't been lost. It was just rearranged. And that really impacted me because I thought, you know what? That is how I look at my life now. And I see it at CFS. My life, I didn't lose my life. I didn't lose that time. God just rearranged it. And there were other things that I learned. I do not believe God brought that illness on me, but there were things I learned through it. And so, I took a great encouragement from Bible people that are recorded. Their stories are recorded for our encouragement. Joseph, as we know, was taken out of his family and his people for 13 years. And God restored him and did a mighty work. And then there was David, who was anointed king. And then it wasn't for 15 years, he was on the run from Saul before he actually stepped into his kingship. And then we all know Moses, he was on the backside of a desert for 40 years. So there were a lot of Bible characters that were kind of pulled out of the trajectory of their life. And things didn't look real good as they were trying to get through that wilderness. And I really saw parallels for me in my healing journey that that I was on a journey. God was in it. I had to trust Him with the timing. I had to trust Him with my healing. And those characters just really encouraged me because God has a destiny for you. And I know it is not to be sick and bad. And so, I think about David and Ziklag. You probably are familiar with, or you may be familiar with this story. It's in, I think, Samuel in the Old Testament. And it talks about how David, when he was on the run from Saul, he was anointed as king, but the current king, Saul, became very angry at David for no reason other than people loved him and he was a great warrior. And so David was on the run from him for 15 years. And during that time, he ended up in the land of his enemies, the Philistines, and he and this band of, people, these men, they were living, in the desert, and they had found this city they called Ziklag, and they were living there, and that city was attacked. And while they were gone. So they were all off on a march protecting some other people. And then they were attacked by enemies. And when they came back, all their women and children had been taken. And the whole city was in ruins and smoke and burned down. And so David, they were decimated. They lost everything. And everyone, it says they wept until they could weep no more. And I don't know if you've ever been that desperate during your health journey, but I was many times where I wept till I could weep no more over what I lost, okay? And so David, what it says is David encouraged himself in the Lord. His men wanted to stone him. They were turning on him out of their grief. We're going to kill David. And so David inquired of the Lord. And the Lord told him, because David said, should we go after these people? Will we have any success? They had no idea where these people had gone. God said, go and you will recover all. Bam. That verse was my verse. I was like, I will recover all. God is going to be with me as I go. And the interesting thing is, to me, there were so many parallels because David and his men had no idea where these people had gone with their wives and children. They just set out. And sometimes it's like that when you're trying to recover from chronic fatigue syndrome. You have no idea and you don't even feel like you've got the energy to go after your healing. So, but the interesting thing is they made a motion, once they once David had heard from God that he would recover, they left and they just went through the desert. And you know what they did? They found a slave that was in the desert, and he had been left by that company that had attacked their village. So I felt like this was my journey, like as I was just moving, didn't know what I was doing. Okay, maybe I joined a program, or maybe I started alternate nostril breathing to help my sleep. Maybe I did these little things, but then it's like you find something and then that gives you better direction. So this slave was able to tell David where these men were going. So then they had a course and a direction. But if they just had stayed in Ziklag, they would have never found their families and wives, right? They would have just been stuck. They had to start moving even though they didn't know where to go, because God can begin to direct you when you're moving. So I just encourage you to, whatever the next step is for you, take that trusting God to lead you. So basically, once they found this fella, they were able to go find that camp of people, take all their wives and children back. And not only that, they took all the spoils of those people and brought it back. So they actually gained in the process. And do you know what happened to David after that? 2 days later, after 15 years of running from Saul, Saul died on the battlefield and David was made king. So he actually reached his destiny, even though for those 15 years, all he was doing was living in caves and living in the desert and trying to stay out of Saul's way. So, I just see that as a whole picture of CFS. And yet you are going to be directed to your destiny. So that's what I felt. And I think about that. Your time was not lost. It's just been redirected, rearranged. And God is going to bring you out and you will fulfill the purpose for which he's given you. And so that was just an encouraging story for me. I hope those are some good reminders to you to trust in him with his timing, trust in him for his direction. So here's a couple of verses that I want to share with you that kind of support this idea. Oh, grant us aid against the enemy, for human help is worthless. With God, we shall do valiantly. It is he who shall tread down our foes. And I think of CFS as our foes, tries to steal our life. But with God, we can do valiantly. Here's another one. Come, let us return to the Lord. He will heal us. He will bind up our wounds. He will revive us. He will restore us, that we may live in his presence. Let us acknowledge the Lord. Let us press in to acknowledge him. As surely as the sun rises, he will appear. And that's out of Hosea 6:1-3. So anyway, supernatural warriors, remember, you've got supernatural power on the inside of you. As the Bible says, the same power that raised Christ from the dead lives on the inside of you. So keep going, and I speak life, health, and wholeness over you. Hey warriors, thanks for joining me today on Supernatural Sunday. I hope you will give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to hear and discuss more faith-based ideas on our healing journey. And join me over at CFS Warriors on YouTube, another channel that I have just for encouragement and inspiration, practical strategies in the journey. And one other thing you can do is join us at CFS Warriors Academy on Facebook. It is a group of individuals looking forward to recovery, and I have the mentors that helped me in recovery sharing gems from their modalities of healing on it. So I hope you will join us over there, and take care. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.